Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Take Back My Brain. I am your host, Lori Hammer, and I am excited today to bring you Dr. Jeff Crippen. And he is from Texas. He is a chiropractor, and he's also a wellness coach, a nutritionist, and so much more. So we're going to dive into nature's perfect food today. But before we dive into that, Dr. Jeff, I want to thank you for being here. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. It's a pleasure to be here and I appreciate the invitation.
You bet, because you are, like I said, you're a chiropractor, you're a mindset coach. You do so much for all of your patients. I can tell. It's amazing. And you have a book. What's your book's name?
Awesome. The book is called Timeless Youth, which is the 5 Truths of Transformational Wellness and Holistic Healing. And we have it in Spanish in case anybody listens in English, but reads Spanish, which is Tu Eterna
Fantastic.
Juventud as well. So it's in both languages.
Great. So I would love to hear, we all have our personal story, how we get into
Sure.
wellness. And so I would love to hear your story, and then I want to dive into nature's perfect food.
Yeah, awesome. Great. I'd love to go there. So basically my experience through the medical system started when I was about 6 years old. And I started getting headaches and would have a headache every once in a while and did what my parents knew to do at that time, which
Mm-hmm.
was go to the pediatrician and eventually took some children's Tylenol, some children's
Sure.
Motrin, some children's Advil. The only problem was the headaches kept getting worse. So eventually repeated trips to the pediatrician, eventually started getting some prescription medications
Hmm.
that would get stronger. And then the headaches continued to get worse for a couple of years to the point that I was referred to a neurologist and eventually a neurosurgeon because progressively worsening head pain in a child that doesn't respond to traditional pain relievers is a potential red flag symptom, meaning,
Right.
hey, something bad could be going on here, right? So they
Right.
wanted to screen for cancer, infection of the brain, some kind of lesion. Space occupying lesion is the term, but something growing in the brain, basically. And, the worst of that would be cancer. So, had a CT scan. They found something in my brain, didn't know what it is, referred me back for an MRI. And I remember being in the neurosurgeon's office. I was maybe 8 years old at the time. His name was Dr. Wolf, which is fitting with my experience with the medical system. But like
Right.
his name was Dr. Wolf, and I remember him looking me in the eyes, explaining what they found in my brain, which was what's called a congenital arachnoid cyst, but basically a benign cyst in the brain that could or could not be causing the headaches. If you have any sports fans listening to this, there was a football coach, Urban Meyer. He had a similar thing. He was forced to retire a couple of times because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I remember him looking me in the eye and say, "We found this. What we think is causing the headache," which for me was a huge relief because I had
Right.
spent years keep getting worse. No one has an answer. You go doctor to doctor to doctor, and just kind of in that frustration. So when finally says, "Here's what's causing your pain," and then he says, "But we're not going to do surgery," I was crushed. Looking back on it, I'm eternally grateful they didn't do brain surgery
Right.
when I was
Right.
eight
But
years old.
at the time, we're like,
Exactly.
okay, you found it. Now fix it.
Exactly. Because I was so indoctrinated, and that medical
Yes.
system is here's the symptom or here's the cause, cut it out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is
Yeah.
basically that idea. So that launched the journey of trying to figure out, well, what heck am I going to do if that's not an option? So when took another about 8 or 10 years of the headaches getting worse.
Wow.
And at its worst, I had a headache for 2 years. So every moment, every day, nonstop for 2 years, which, was life altering at that point
Yeah.
to the point where I made a decision one time, and we're in high school at this point, where I made a decision, I'm not going to go on living like this. Like I'm
Sure.
either going to figure this out or something else is going to happen. And I had no interest in getting into to to healthcare or being a doctor. I mean, the closest I got was when I got some lab work done as a kid. This lady
Mm-hmm.
looks at me and she said, "Son, I know what you're going to be when you get older." I said, "Okay, what?" At this point I was in the astronaut stage of my life. So that's
Sure.
what I thought I was going to be.
Right.
And she said, "You're going to be a doctor." I said, "A doctor?
Huh?
Why?" She goes, "Because I can't read anything you just wrote on this piece of paper." So that was as close as I thought. But through that decision, and kind of the depths of the head pain was the beginning of a journey that led me to where I am today.
Right. So how'd you get into chiropractic? Like what led you there?
Yeah, great question. So I got to college, looked at about 18 different majors,
Mm-hmm.
including dropping out. My parents gently tapped me on the shoulder and said, maybe you shouldn't drop out.
Right.
So then it was
No.
like, okay, what do I do? So I majored in Spanish, um, and and then I just figured, and then end up taking the pre-med class, and then I had to figure out what do I want to do with that? How do I want to help people? And
Mhm.
how I ended up in chiropractic was a couple different reasons, but at the beginning, when I would get adjusted, I'd get some symptomatic relief. So if the headache was a 7, it would go down to a 4. So it was very helpful. It was one of the first things I found that would actually helpful for me. But
Wow.
then it was later on when I found a chiropractor who combined that with nutrition and with diet and with lifestyle that I began to go through a process about a year and a half to 2 years of rebuilding my body from the ground up. And that was really transformational to my life. So I decided I want to help others the way this chiropractor had helped me. And that's how I
Right.
ended up in
And
chiropractic school.
did your headaches go away during that time when you were working?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So it went away to the point that just went to from went away to the point that was unrecognizable for it was before. Occasionally I would still get a headache, but I would know exactly why and I'd be able to
Right.
handle it quickly. Nothing like living with it for 2 years because it was like, go to much school as I could, come home, lay on the couch for 2, 3 hours, cook myself food because I cut out sugar and cut out dairy as like 16. And my mom's like, well, great. If you can eat what I can, she was busy. I had 3 younger sisters. So it's like,
Sure.
if you can eat what we're eating as a family, that's great. If not, so I learned to cook, right? Then, so I make a little food, do a little homework, back on the
Mhm.
couch. And then that was like rinse and repeat for a year
Wow.
or two. So to where I was now, had to quit playing sports. I mean, just, it was, I didn't know if college was going to be even an option for me to go. And even one of the things that helped me go was able to get into, a dorm room with a kitchen, with a fridge,
Mm,
didn't have to do the food plan at school so I could cook my own meals. And like that was a
right.
deciding factor of, okay, this seems like something I could do just because I found myself so sensitive to certain foods at that point in my healing journey.
Right. Right. That's amazing because there's so many people that have not just even chronic headaches, but chronic conditions like that. And, it's life altering, right? And
For sure.
it's nice that you're able to find some adjustments that could be made so you could continue your healing journey. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was crucial at the time because like you said, when you're in the depths of pain or
Yeah.
frustration and just not know which way to turn, it's like it's such a and then the thing is you get those baby steps forward. But like they're like the fragile little first steps where you're actually more likely to fall than
Right.
as until you get
Yeah.
stronger. So
Yeah.
especially at the beginning part, it's like, you kind of okay, I can kind of start to feel better, but there's like 8 spinning plates that you have to keep spinning all at the same time to keep
Yes.
going.
It's
And eventually
overwhelming. Yeah.
yeah, and then it turns to 7, and then it turns to 6, and eventually
Yeah.
you develop more resiliency in the body. But at the beginning, it's so important that you have the right environment, the right people around you, the right disciplines, right, the right foods, and you're just a lot more sensitive early on in that healing journey is what I found myself and with patients as well.
Oh, 100%. And then to be able to like just to stay the course. I mean, so many
Yeah.
people give up because they're like, okay, I still have, 6 out of the 8 plates spinning and I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. That's a real you brought up a great point because that's a big mental hurdle and you will see, you know, unfortunately or fortunately, you'll see people quit right when they start early on in
yeah,
that healing process,
yeah.
right? Instead of like, it's the old analogy like of water, boils at 212 degrees. You can get it up
Hmm.
to 180 or 190 or whatever, but
Yeah,
up to 211. But it's all that effort you put in, unless you get it that last step of the way, doesn't power that steam engine, even though
right.
you've
'Cause
done so many right things.
how many years you had that pain before the pain went away, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
hours
exactly.
and dollars and, time and just energy and, mental fortitude in there before you got that big relief. I don't think we're in such a quick fix society, this
Yeah.
microwave society, like, okay, well, I've been working at this a year and I only feel like this much better, you know,
Yeah.
but this much better can turn into, this much better in
Yeah.
probably in the next 6 months. I mean, you don't know. And it breaks my heart when people give up.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just know in my journey, it probably took me 7 or 9 years to find the right practitioner to work with.
Yeah.
And then I was in Michigan at the time. He was in Atlanta, and I'd fly down maybe once every 3 months to
Wow.
see him. And it was like the first time I went back, so 3 months later, I wasn't worse, right? Which
Hmm.
for me was a huge improvement because for the
Huge.
last 13 years, every month or so was getting worse, month after month after month. So if I squinted just right, I thought, I could possibly be better, but I almost didn't even trust it at that time, because it was
Right.
so fragile at the beginning. But that's what the first step of improvement looked like for me is not getting worse and then eventually turning it around. And in a year and a half later, my life was unrecognizable. But that was kind of the timeline for me.
Right. Right. just curious, like what
Yeah.
advice would you give to people who are listening? Because I know, chronic pain is such a big issue.
Yeah.
Um, how many years it say, was it 9 years before you found the right practitioner? Like, what do you say
Yeah.
to people like, because that's really, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of time. And how did you maintain through that journey to get to the point where you are now?
Yeah. I mean, just being stubborn as heck. I mean, was part of what it was.
Yeah,
It just, and I tried a lot of stuff. I mean, so in my headache journey, it, when you're going, like, let's say I'm 5 years into that, everyone knows I've got headaches. I'm not playing sports. All my
yeah,
parents, friends know. Everyone's got advice for you, right?
sure.
Everyone's telling you,
Everybody
here's
does.
what you need to
Yes.
do. And some of it was, ridiculous. Some people said, coffee causes headaches. And I was like 9 at that point. Then they said, coffee makes the headaches better. I'm still 9 years old. And then it's
Right.
like, I've read red wine's good for your headaches. Like I'm 12 at this point, and then I've
Right.
heard red wine causes headaches. So yeah, you just have to. So in my case, it's just I threw a lot of stuff at the wall and just kind of trying to find out what works or what doesn't. The advice I would have for people is, I mean, probably what we don't do enough is maybe talk to 5 different doctors and
Hmm.
and don't do 5 different plans, but
Yeah.
just talk to the 5 different people or practitioners or healers or people on the journey, and just trust that gut. When you talk to someone, that feeling you get when you've got a good friend who
Yep.
just talks to you and you just know you feel better and you just know they know and you
Yeah.
feel lighter just from that conversation. I think you got to trust that instinct and, ask referrals through the network, but sit down with a couple people at the beginning. And then once you do that, then you got to find the one you trust and you want to work with. And then you've got to give them the time. And if they tell you it's going to be a year-long journey, then you got to give them a year, right? Or
Hmm.
if they say it's going to be 6 months or two, whatever it's going to be, you got to
Yep.
do all the interviewing first. But then once you find the person, walk that path with them because you
Yep.
trusted them once, and it's having 2 or 3 or 4 different voices in the ear at one time. That's when it becomes problematic and difficult
Oh, yeah.
versus hearing one, trusting it, and just saying, I made a connection. I talked to whoever I want to at the beginning, and then go through that process and trust them through it.
Oh, that's fantastic advice. I love that. I love
Yeah.
it. So that kind of leads us into, we're going to talk about food,
Yeah.
and nature's perfect food. So kind of lead us into that. What is it? What is nature's perfect food to start with?
Yeah. So we'll get into the nature's perfect food is breast milk is kind of how we're going to get into it. And
Yeah.
and the context around that is there's a paradigm in medicine which is one size fits all,
Right.
right? This kind of assembly line medicine. So the story I tell in my book is the story of the Model T, right? That you know, at one point they were making millions of Model Ts per year. And famously, you could have the Model T in any color you wanted as long as it
Right.
was black and just looked
Right.
like every other Model T,
Yeah.
right? And 1921, 2/3 of all the automobiles built in the United States was a Model T, and all of them were identical in black. And Henry Ford was famous for not listening to his customers' feedback. He
Hmm.
said, if I would have asked my customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. So he
Right.
very much had this top-down approach and said, I'm going to tell you what you want. Well, in 1927, there was a competitor, uh, and was General Motors at the time. And Sloan was leading General Motors, and he had this theory: a car for every purse and purpose. So what it
Mm,
was saying, different price points and different uses for the car. And
right.
he started listening to his customers. And basically, about 6 years later, the Model T closed and it was replaced by the Model A because this one size fits all approach revolutionized the automobile, brought it to many people, but eventually, without listening to the customer, without finding that right fit,
Hmm.
without without going with putting a one size fits all approach instead of individualizing, didn't work. So oftentimes we're in a healthcare system that is one size fits all, right? None of us, like, when's the last time you had a one size fits all poncho that you were like, oh, I think this relatively fits me, right?
Right.
Even
Right.
if it doesn't work in ponchos, it's not going to work in
It's
medicine.
not going to work in anything.
Right. So that's the idea. And then one extreme of this in the diet area is the RDAs, or the recommended daily allowance,
Hmm.
which is basically was going to say fictional, and it's not quite fictional, but it seems like it.
But it's pretty bunky. Yeah.
Yeah, this mythical 2,000 calorie diet that says,
Right.
everyone needs the same thing. And we can look at this quite simply. Somebody who's 300 pounds has different nutrient requirements than someone who's 120 pounds.
Clearly.
A cycling female has different nutritional requirements than someone who's not cycling.
Yes.
Right. A weightlifter needs more protein. Right. Somebody's under stress needs more B vitamins and more calcium and magnesium. So you could go through this, and it's obviously this one size fits all fallacy is just that. It's a fallacy. So let's look at breast milk. And one of the reasons I said it was, the most was nature's perfect food is because of how incredibly dynamic it is. So one of the things we see is, the baby's first meal, colostrum, is very high in probiotics. So it's basically has a special diet specifically to colonize the gut. And then what you'll see is when it's hotter outside, the breast milk will have a higher water content. At the beginning, it's more water content. The hind milk, which comes at the end, is going to be generally more fat. When a baby's sick, you'll find more immunoglobulins or immune support that's in there. And actually, if a mom has twins or is breastfeeding two children at the same time, the milk each child gets will be different, one from the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just incredible, right? Breast milk for boys contains about 25% more calories than it does for girls.
Wow.
So it's this incredible variation that's individualized at every step of the way. And there's this dynamic interplay between mom and baby and mom that's constantly customizing the diet. And I think that is a model for what we need, because depending on our needs, our nutrient requirements, the stresses we're under, how much we're working out, our nutrient requirements are much more better represented by the baby and mom in that dynamic relationship than the label on the side of the food box that says you need X nutrients.
Yes. Yeah. So how do we do that, as consumers of food? Like, what does it look like? Say, use me as an example. I'm a 50-year-old woman, I'm perimenopausal. And so how do I know what I need throughout my cycle still?
Good. So the question, so that's a fantastic question. And to add one more level of complexity to it, I'll give you one more stat and then we'll get to the specifics of you. And there was a gentleman named Roger Williams. He's a PhD researcher at the University of Texas. He discovered 2 B vitamins and his brother discovered a third. So this guy, he knows some things about nutrition, right? Biochemistry. And what he found is that individual nutrient requirements can vary up to 100x person to person.
Oh.
So what that means is not do somebody who's breastfeeding need 25% more omega-3s or a little bit more iron, right? A first cycling female or 300-pound weightlifter might need an extra 100 grams of protein. He said nutrient requirements would vary 100x person to person. And I think we saw a great example of this during COVID in the sense of what's the first nutrient people, would talk about. One of the main ones was zinc.
Yeah.
Right. Increased zinc need because it inhibits viral replication, among other things. And one of the main side effects of COVID was loss of taste and smell. And of course, zinc is very important for taste and smell.
Yes.
So that's one example. He looked specifically at patients with severe immune deficiencies, I think even hepatitis, and saw their need for vitamin C went up 75 or 100x person to person.
Wow.
So this idea that we all need this one size fits all diet isn't just off by a factor of 2. But it's closer to off a factor of 100. Okay. So then how do we determine that for you?
Right.
So, I'd start with a good history. I think the first step is listening to your body. Are there certain foods that you feel better eating? Are there certain foods that you feel worse eating?
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Yeah. Good. And then we could go through each of what those things are, right? Kind of look at that there. The second thing is an understanding of which systems are stressed in the body. So we would look through, do a couple different approaches. One is based on blood work, and the second is based on muscle testing or kinesiology, using that to determine the strength of organs and systems. But for example, let's say somebody's under a lot of stress. Well, what are the nutrients that get depleted in the stress response? One of them can be whole food based B vitamins, not the synthetic ones that are often in the store, but foods that are rich in B vitamins, things like sweet potato, beet, nutritional yeast, liver.
Yeah.
things like that. Whole food vitamin C. You can also see magnesium needs can increase under stress. So
Hmm.
can calcium, manganese, which are some of the alkaline ash or the relaxing minerals of the body.
Hmm.
So I think it's thinking through the systems and understanding. The example I give patients is, if you drive your car 1,000 miles, you're going to have to change the oil sooner and you're going to
Right.
have to fill it up with gas more. It's the same thing if your brain's constantly running,
Yeah.
like with anxiety, right? Or it's the same thing, right? And I know that's an area of specialty for you, but you can start looking at the nutrients required for specific, neurotransmitter synthesis or just overall brain health. So just rebuilding the body and just recognizing that, one size doesn't necessarily fit all, and paying attention to your body to say, okay, if we do this with your diet or do this from a whole food supplement standpoint, do you feel better? And if
Hmm.
you do, then the deficiency or the improvement confirms the deficiency, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Oh yeah. It's all about deficiencies.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
So
the improvement kind of tells you, yeah, we're on the
yeah,
right
it worked.
track. You're feeling better and you keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes a while to fix those deficiencies, right? So I notice with a lot of my clients, they'll feel better, like especially when we're doing amino acid therapy, I do it in the office in 2 to 5 minutes, their brain is feeling different. But to
Yeah.
get those long lasting effects, you're going to have to be super consistent and do it long term so that you can rebuild the brain, you can rebuild the body so that your body can maintain that. And it is such a dance, isn't it? To teach people like to listen, like it's taken me years to figure this out. I don't know about
Sure.
you,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, okay, in this piece of my
Yes.
cycle, I am craving, protein. And so that's what I should eat, and that's okay. And to not
Yeah.
follow somebody else's mantra, or like,
Yeah.
I need a lot of carbs in this period of my life because I have a lot of stress. It's this part of my cycle, all those kind of things. So it's okay if I'm eating, 200 to 300 carbs in these few days because that's what my body needs, and to not feel bad about it. I
Yeah.
think I don't know what you think, but we have such a hard time being in tune because we have so much noise from the outside telling us, what's a good diet, what's a bad diet, and don't eat protein, don't eat carbs, don't eat fat, eat, all of these things. And we've forgotten because we have all this noise to like, what is your body telling you, right?